Hello, we are in month 8 of 12. Not meaning to brag, but I am absolutely obliterating my reading goal. I'm absolutely reading way more than I said I was gonna read. I think now's a good time to just go through and say what my favorite 10 books are that I've read this year out of 50 something, I think. Out of all the books that I read this year, Fourth Wing has been one of the most just like making me feel things and just bringing me into the world, and it's been the most like epic too. In this book you have a girl who's like training to be a dragon rider. I think that's what's called. I kind of forgot like the terms. I always do when it comes to fantasy books. So her name is Violet and she goes to ride dragons, but it's like really intense and like a deadly trial to get yourself to be able to be like one of the dragon riders, and her mom's kind of forcing her to do it because she's like weaker than her siblings and she's not really meant for this sort of thing, but she does it anyway because she's like forced to by her mom. She immediately has an enemy because of the past and like the conflict between her mom and like her mom's like a political figure, so she has like enemies. One of her mom's enemy's sons becomes her enemy immediately, but there's a lot less rules and things protecting her in this environment. It's very like you're on your own and you have to be strong to survive. Enemies to lovers, dragons, really cool action scenes. There's a pretty good mix of romance, action, and then there's like comedic relief in it too, which I really love some comedic relief in books, but I feel like it makes the characters more real. I really enjoyed this one and I'd recommend it to anyone, and it's an adult fantasy. Next up is one of those books that is just very clear to me that this would be in this list because it's just so good. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Never before have I read a book like this. The story is just so good. The way it is written, like it brings you in and you just are on the edge of your seat. Like I was like so excited about reading this and excited about seeing what happens next. I listened to it as an audiobook and that was just the best experience because I'd like follow along and write like my guesses in the pages and then I would listen to it as I go. I could just be like getting stuff done but then listening to this book, and it was just such a great experience and so much fun. Like when I think of a book that I had just so much fun listening to, I think of this one. And I'm not like a murder podcast type of girl. Like I don't really like to listen to murder podcasts, but this book I loved. Like I know it's like kind of dark, but I don't know, like I just loved it. It was really, really good, really interesting, and not too scary. It made me want to read so many more books like this because it just like opened my eyes to this new genre that I really, really like. The main girl in it, Pip, is doing a school project where she's like opening up a case that was, I think it's a cold case, right? When it's never like fully uncovered, but everyone like assumes that this certain thing happened, and she's like, I don't really think that's what happened. So she goes in and starts being a detective for a school project and is trying to uncover what actually happened and prove this person innocent. She ends up uncovering some crazy stuff. Okay, of course, Daisy Jones and the Six. I say of course because this book was just so good. I listened to this one also as an audiobook, and I was trying to think of what my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book is, and she writes so many great books, and I just read Malibu Rising. I love that one. I was like, wait, was that one my favorite? Then when I think back, I think of like my reactions and the feelings I had and how connected I was to the story, and like I was just in it when I was reading this. Like I was so in it. Okay, it's a bit later, as you can tell. I have my ring light on for helping with lighting, but I just went to go hang out with my nieces for a little bit, and now I'm going to continue talking about the books. This next book is What Happens After Midnight. I personally just had a great time reading this book. So much fun to read, and I felt like I was with them. Like there was this big prank that was being pulled off at this like high school, an on-campus type of high school where they live there. It all takes place at after midnight or at nighttime. There's this person called the Jester, and they're like the school's prankster, but it's passed down each year from jester to jester, so they like no one ever knows who the Jester is. The Jester recruits like a group of people, so all the people who are recruited by the Jester help to pull off this huge prank, and so she ends up being recruited, the main girl in this. She ends up working with her ex to pull off this huge prank. It's just, there's so much like angst, you know, and I love some good angst, so there's a lot of that in there, and it was so fun to read, and I just had so much fun. Even like the side characters were just so cool and fun to read about. I love their personalities, and I felt like it was just so special and magical. Something about like a summer night, I love that vibe, and so this was a blast. And I just love books with games in them. This next book, in my opinion, it has somewhat similar vibes to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder because it's like a whole mystery murder type of thing, but it's also completely different. But the main girl in this is also trying to like uncover a cold case, so kind of similar. So, okay, backstory. Her mom was murdered and she does not know who did it. It is a mystery, but she's the one who found her, and she like saw the crime scene and everything, and it was like really traumatizing. Her mom's body like wasn't there anymore, so she just doesn't know. She's like doesn't know what happened. Like years later, she's living with some relatives. She's waitressing and she's really good at reading people. She like can tell if someone's gonna tip or not and like how they're going to tip. She's called like a natural profiler, so she could just see someone and she like knows their deal. And apparently her mom was a psychic, and it's because she could do the same thing that her daughter can do, where she could just look at someone and know what their deal is. She's waitressing and there's this guy sitting down and she goes up to him and he's like, how, like, you tell me how I like my eggs, and she guesses it right, and then he gives her this card, and so he was there to like recruit her, and then she gets a call, or she calls the number, I think she calls the number, and she goes to this place and they're like, we want you to like train with us, you're a natural profiler. And there's like different naturals, like for example the guy who was in the restaurant she was working at, Michael, he is like can tell people's emotions just by looking at them. He like knows what they're feeling. There's a girl who can lie seamlessly, and she can also detect when other people are lying. And then there's another girl who can see patterns, like just a really complex patterns super easily. And these aren't superpowers, they're just like intellectual sort of things that they naturally are able to do. She starts working with them because she just kind of wants to figure out what happened to her mom. She ends up becoming a target of a serial killer. It's very intense, and there's like a love triangle, which is really fun. I really like this love triangle. Also, this one is not too scary, but I would not read it right before you're about to go to bed. The Dead Romantics. This one is just very close to my heart because it's so beautiful. Like, you know those ones that just like nestle into your soul and you remember them. It's just so sweet and has such a powerful message, and it gave me like a sense of peace, and so reading it for me was like almost therapeutic. I also always read it like super early in the morning because I was filming like a reading challenge where I wake up really early to read, and that just, I think that in combination with how like just beautiful and peaceful this book is, it was just so great. And the romance is so good in this. Like, don't let the concept of the love interest being a ghost scare you, because I promise it is so cute. Like, it's so good, and it's not even, it's like I'm pretty sure I cried, but it's like not overly sad. Like, it really isn't. She's like a ghostwriter for a big famous romance author. She's a really talented writer, and then there's a guy who is the editor, and he's like a new editor, and she comes into the room and she's like, I'm not gonna finish the book on time. She doesn't really believe in love anymore because her boyfriend was her ex-boyfriend was kind of terrible. And then he's like, no, you have to finish it. You have to finish this romance novel by the deadline. She's like, wow, that's annoying. Also, she could talk to ghosts. That's actually a really good point. I should have said that earlier. She could talk to ghosts. Her family works at like a cemetery place, like a graveyard, and that's like where she grew up and lived. Since she could talk to ghosts, she solved a crime, or she solved like a case when she was younger by talking to a ghost, and then everyone was kind of bullying her because she was saying that she could talk to ghosts. So she went far away from home, and now she's in New York, and that's where she meets this editor and stuff. And she hears like a knock on the door, and she opens it, and it's her editor, but he's like he's dead, like he's a ghost. So that's where the romance starts. Yours Truly is one of the best books that I read this year. This is a not really enemies to lovers, it's more of a like almost enemies, but then like gets resolved very quickly. Friends to lovers. They start off like writing letters back and forth, and I just think that's adorable, and letters kind of become their thing. This is the first book that I read by Abby Jimenez, and I'm really happy I read it because she is just such a good writer. This book is so funny, but also like so thoughtful. Like the guy main character in it, Jacob, is just so sweet and thoughtful. The way that he thinks, like I really did fall in love with his character. I love Brianna. Her character is kind of going through a lot in the beginning of the book, and it's just, she's just such a good person too, and they're just two amazing people who like deserve the best finding each other, and I love them. There's a fake dating trope that's actually a really big part of this book. There's also a one bed trope. There's just, you know, a couple different tropes in there. It's very just like a vulnerable good romance. Fate of Wrath and Flame. This is an adult fantasy book, and it was so good. I hadn't read this one for a while. I was it was one of those ones that I had on my shelf for a long time, and I just didn't pick it up. I'm really happy I picked it up because I was like amazed by it. In the beginning I was like, is this gonna bore me? But then it so quickly got me into the story. I'll just say simply, if you like vampires, you might like this. If you like magic, you might like this. I'm trying to think of more things that are in it. If you like people with powers, you might like this. If you like multiple dimensions or worlds, you might like this. If you like enemies to lovers, where like the guy ends up being like obsessed, you will love this. It's just like so dramatic and like a just great fantasy, you know, when you're just like swept into the world and you're like, oh my god. It is a romantasy for sure. There's a lot of romance in this. There's some action, there's just like a really cool world building and like there's just like cool concepts. I loved it. That's really what I have to say about it, is I loved it. And if you've ever read like The Simple Wild, this is by the same author, which is kind of cool because I just like when authors, like seeing how they do different genres is pretty cool. Last but not least, The Stolen Heir. I can't even, okay. You know when you're reading a book and you feel like you've just been completely transported, but it's like a magical feeling, like the one that you only get with specific special books, and you feel just like you never want to leave or stop reading about that world. You could just like read about it forever. That's how I feel about the world of like The Cruel Prince. This is like a kind of a spin-off series with the younger brother all grown up. If you like fairies and like fae and stuff and just cool, whimsical, cruel, funny worlds, then you'll like this one. I just have such a blast reading these books, and this one I didn't know if I was gonna like it as much as some of her other books when I was reading the first part, but then I was so hooked by the end, the same feeling where I'm like, I have to read the second one immediately, like I need to. And of course, it's not out yet, but I'm really excited for it to come out because I'm going to be reading it right away. This is a YA fantasy, and it's enemies to lovers, but it's complicated. You know how The Cruel Prince, like if you've read The Cruel Prince by her, I'm saying like mentioning that one because it's like a really popular one from this author, and her books, at least that series and this one, kind of similar. So the world is the same, but like they're kind of similar too in their characters and things. The romance is just super layered. There's a lot going on. I feel like it's gonna be a roller coaster towards like an ending, but it's one that is so fun to read, and it's just like, oh, it like gives me butterflies. I just love it. I love it. And that is all that are in the top 10 for me. Those are my top 10 favorite books so far of the year. Make sure to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of my videos. My Goodreads, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads will be in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.